The complaint reached Patton before breakfast, written on clean paper by SS officers who said their meals were beneath their rank, while thin prisoners waited outside the kitchen fence with empty bowls in their hands. By the time Patton entered the camp, the cooks had stopped serving, the guards had gone quiet, and one tray of untouched food sat on a table marked for the men who believed they deserved to eat first. The first trouble began at the morning ration line when 3 captured SS officers stepped out of the prisoner column and refused to take the same breakfast served to the rest of the camp. One of them placed his tin bowl on the distribution table without touching the food, then demanded that an interpreter be brought because officers of his rank could not be fed like ordinary soldiers. The kitchen sergeant tried to keep the line moving, but other prisoners stopped behind the SS officers, and the cooks lowered their ladles as the argument spread across the yard. The camp captain arrived from the administration hut and ordered the 3 men back into line, but the senior SS officer handed him a written complaint prepared before the ration bell had even sounded. The paper accused the camp of disrespecting captured officers, mixing them with enlisted men, and serving food that did not match the dignity of their former commands. Behind them, ordinary German POWs stood in mud with their bowls pressed against their coats, waiting for the argument to end so breakfast could continue. The captain read the complaint twice, then looked toward the kitchen where bread, thin porridge, and coffee substitute were already measured for every prisoner according to the camp schedule. The SS officers refused again, this time loud enough for the nearest barracks to hear, and one of them said enlisted prisoners should not receive equal portions while officers were forced to stand in the same line. That sentence changed the air in the yard because it was no longer only a complaint about food, but a demand to rebuild rank inside a prison camp. The captain ordered the kitchen line halted and told the guards to separate the SS officers from the rest of the prisoners until headquarters answered. The ordinary prisoners did not shout, but they watched the halted food table with hard faces, because every delay meant bowls cooled, work details waited, and hungry men paid for an argument they had not started. By mid-morning, the captain sent a message to Patton's staff explaining that captured SS officers were refusing standard rations and demanding separate treatment before the camp could continue regular distribution. The complaint that had begun at a food table now threatened to divide the entire compound. Because the officers wanted status restored, the enlisted prisoners wanted breakfast, and the guards were trapped between order and resentment. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. The escalation began when the SS officers refused to return to their barracks and instead demanded a private meal served inside the officer enclosure. The captain denied the request, but the senior officer stood near the fence and announced in German that officers should not be humiliated by sharing meals with men who had once obeyed their orders. That statement moved quickly through the camp, and within minutes the enlisted prisoners were arguing among themselves about whether the SS officers were trying to control the food line. A prisoner cook dropped a crate of bread near the kitchen door after 2 men shoved each other while trying to see what was happening. The captain ordered the German barracks leaders brought forward, not to negotiate with the SS officers, but to keep the rest of the camp from turning the ration dispute into a prisoner fight. One barracks leader told the interpreter that the SS men had already been pressuring prisoners to trade bread, cigarettes, and parcels in exchange for protection and old favors. The conflict widened when a guard searched the officer enclosure and found extra coffee packets, sugar, and canned meat hidden under blankets inside 2 footlockers. The SS officers claimed the goods were private property saved from earlier Red Cross parcels, but the markings on several tins matched supplies reported missing from common distribution 2 days earlier. The captain ordered every locker in the officer enclosure searched while MPs stood at the door and prisoners watched from behind the fence. The search produced folded complaint drafts, lists of prisoners who owed food, and a small notebook recording trades in bread portions and cigarettes. The senior SS officer said the notebook showed discipline among prisoners, but the captain saw a private ration system growing inside the camp. The kitchen line remained closed during the search, and that delay made the camp more unstable than the original complaint. By noon, work crews were late. The infirmary asked for meals for weak prisoners, and the guards reported that several enlisted POWs were refusing to enter the mess line until the SS officers were dealt with. The captain sent a second message to headquarters, adding that the ration complaint had exposed hidden food, prisoner pressure, and an attempt by SS officers to separate themselves from the men around them. When Patton's staff car was reported at the outer gate, the 3 SS officers straightened their coats, expecting command authority to restore their privileges, while the captain placed the hidden notebook, seized food tins, and untouched bowls on a table near the kitchen. The major consequence came before Patton even spoke, because the captain ordered the seized food displayed in the open yard for every prisoner to see. The hidden coffee packets, canned meat, sugar, and bread tallies were placed beside the written complaint, turning the SS officers' demand for better meals into evidence of private control over food. The senior SS officer objected and said the display insulted captured officers, but the interpreter repeated the objection aloud, and the enlisted prisoners heard the same word that had started the morning trouble. Patton arrived through the gate with 2 staff officers, walked past the SS men without greeting them, and stopped first at the kitchen table where the untouched bowls had gone cold. He asked the captain why the line had stopped, and the captain explained that serving ordinary prisoners while the officer complaint remained unresolved might start a fight. Patton looked down the line of thin faces waiting beyond the kitchen fence, then ordered the cooks to prepare fresh portions for the men who had been delayed. The SS officers protested immediately, saying their complaint had not been answered, and one of them stepped forward far enough that an MP placed a hand against his chest. Patton did not raise his voice, but he ordered the complaint read in English and then in German so the entire yard could understand what the officers had demanded. As the words moved through the prisoners, enlisted men turned their heads toward the SS officers, and the gap between rank and hunger became visible in the silence. The doctor arrived from the infirmary and reported that several prisoners had missed a full meal because the kitchen had remained closed during the dispute. That consequence shifted the matter again, because the complaint had now caused a medical delay, not just an administrative problem. Patton ordered the weakest prisoners served first under the doctor's supervision, then told the kitchen sergeant to reopen the line from the barracks with the highest number of sick men. The SS officers stood beside the display table while the first bowls passed them and went to prisoners who had waited since morning. The senior officer demanded to know when officer rations would be served, and Patton finally turned toward him with the cold complaint paper still in his hand. The yard understood that the argument had reached its turning point, because the men who had demanded to eat above others were now watching their own food move farther away with every ladle poured. The reversal came when Patton ordered the SS officers brought to the front of the food line, not to feed them first, but to make them watch the ration system they had tried to bend. He stood beside the kitchen table and told the interpreter to repeat every word clearly, because no officer rank would decide who ate before sick men, working prisoners, or men whose food had been delayed. The senior SS officer tried to interrupt, but Patton held up the complaint paper and said the camp had already heard enough about dignity from men who hid food while others waited. Then he gave the line that moved through the yard before the bowls were even filled. "You eat last." The interpreter repeated it in German, and the sentence struck harder than shouting because it was simple, public, and impossible to misunderstand. The reversal changed the entire yard immediately. The cooks began serving the weakest prisoners first, then the barracks that had missed breakfast, then the work details, while the SS officers stood under guard beside the seized food. One enlisted German prisoner stepped forward to receive his bowl, looked at the SS officers, and then moved away without saying anything. That silent movement mattered because the old command structure inside the prisoner compound had been broken in front of everyone. Patton ordered the hidden goods redistributed through official camp channels, with the doctor receiving priority supplies for the infirmary and the rest counted before prisoner witnesses. The SS officers objected that their property was being stolen, but the captain read the missing supply reports aloud, matching several seized items to common stores. Patton then ordered the officer enclosure searched again by MPs who had not served in the kitchen or warehouse that week, preventing any guard from protecting leaders and fear of old authority to move food without written orders. Patton ordered the senior SS officer and 2 associates removed from the main compound and placed in a separate guarded section where they could no longer pressure enlisted prisoners. The captain replaced the prisoner ration representatives with men selected from multiple barracks, making it harder for one group to control the food table. A new rule was posted at the kitchen door before dark. Meals would be served by medical and work priority only, not former rank, former unit, or prisoner influence. The camp interpreter read the rule in German while MPs stood near the SS officer's empty place in line. The enlisted prisoners watched the notice being nailed to the wall, and several men stepped forward with additional complaints they had been afraid to bring earlier. The doctor collected the names and ordered immediate checks on anyone who had traded food under pressure. The seized notebook, complaint paper, hidden goods list, and medical report were sealed into one file and sent to headquarters with Patton's order attached. No officer complaint would again be accepted without checking whether the men making it had already taken from the men behind them. By the next morning, the SS officers no longer stood at the head of any line. The kitchen served under posted rules, and the prisoner compound had seen that old rank could not buy the first bowl in an American camp. The old arrangement. The search found one more bread ledger hidden inside a mattress, along with names of enlisted prisoners who had been pressured to give up portions. By late afternoon, the complaint had reversed completely. The men who demanded special rations were no longer being evaluated as offended officers, but as organizers of a private food hierarchy inside the camp. When the last enlisted prisoners finished eating, the SS officers were given the same standard meal in the same tin bowls they had rejected that morning. They ate under guard, after every other prisoner had been served. The final irreversible event began that evening when a prisoner from Barracks 4 collapsed near the wash station while carrying the bowl he had received late. The doctor examined him and found that the man had been giving away portions for days under pressure from prisoners connected to the SS officers. The captain ordered Barracks 4 closed for inspection, not as punishment, but to find the men who had been forced into the private ration network. Inside the barracks, MPs found marked bread scraps, hidden cigarette bundles, and a small list of prisoners assigned to deliver portions to the officer enclosure after evening count. The investigation moved beyond the 3 complaining officers because the system had used mess lines. The final change was not in the meal itself, but in who had the power to decide when another man ate. At the next ration call, the SS officers waited at the rear of the line while the infirmary men received their bowls first. The senior officer kept his eyes on the ground when the kitchen sergeant handed him the same porridge he had refused the day before. Patton watched from the gate long enough to see the last bowl served, then folded the complaint paper into the evidence file, because the camp had learned that hunger would not salute rank. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more untold WWII stories.